Today on Mystifiles, deep wells discovered underneath the pyramids, a dried river hidden in the sands of time, and one creation myth can change the course of how we look at the pyramids. What's the relation between the Nile water and the pyramids, and how is it connected to the hydraulic pressure? Were they tombs or an ancient survival machine from the Great Catastrophe? All that and much more will be discovered on episode 8 of Mystifiles. Welcome to Mystifiles, the podcast where we unlock the ancient codes, explore forbidden theories, and travel through the shadows of human history. If you love the unknown, if you believe there's more to this world than what we've been told, you're in the right place. Today's episode might just change the way you look at one of the greatest wonders of the world, the pyramids of Egypt, specifically the Pyramid of Khafre, second only to the Great Pyramid, and home to a new mysterious discovery. In March of this year, 2025, archaeologists have recently uncovered something astonishing, a series of cylindrical wells beneath the pyramid's foundation. But what are they doing there? Could this be the key to understanding the true purpose of these ancient monuments? What if the pyramids were not just tombs, but doomsday survival structures designed to withstand a catastrophic global flood? Stick with me, because by the end of this episode, you may never look at the pyramids the same way again. And hey, if this kind of mystery feeds your curiosity, don't forget to follow, rate, and share this podcast with a friend who loves ancient enigmas just as much as you do. Let's dive in. It started quietly, as many great discoveries do. March 15th, 2025, a team of researchers from Italy and Scotland working near the Pyramid of Khafre, the second largest pyramid on the Giza Plateau, shared their discovery that there are deep underground cylindrical wells extending over 6,500 feet beneath Giza pyramids, 10 times larger than the pyramids themselves, wrapped in coiled pipes. This claim is based on the use of pulse radar devices by experts to create high-resolution images deep underground beneath the structures, in the same way that sonar radar is used to map the depth of the ocean. The wells are perfectly round, unconnected to any burial chamber, not tombs, not ventilation shafts. And the interesting part, they're wrapped with coil-shaped pipes. So now we have our first clue to the bigger riddle. Our next clue is also a discovery that was made by scientists on May 16th, 2024. They found buried branch of the Nile that shows possible channels etched into the earth, long dried and buried beneath centuries of dust and decay. International team of researchers used radar satellite imagery to map the river branch, which they called Ahramat, which means pyramids in Arabic. The once mighty river was increasingly covered in sand, potentially starting during a major drought about 4,200 years ago. The scientists suggested the 40-mile-long, 64-kilometer river branch, which ran by the Giza Pyramid complex, was hidden under desert and farmland for millennia. And by the way, I will leave you all the links to the sources in the description box, so you can read both discoveries and think for yourself. Now let us recall, we have long wells wrapped in coil-shaped pipes and a dried river that was streaming underneath the pyramids. What next? Stay tuned as you will discover something that will change your perception of the pyramid forever. But before I continue, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, speaking of Egypt, our sponsor today is the #1 Lebanese Arabic dialect online teaching platform. So if you're planning to take a tour one day to Arabia, specifically Lebanon, and would like to speak like a local within only a month period, their course can definitely help you. Make sure to check their website. I'll leave you the link in the description box. Back to our riddle. The third clue I have for today is directly from the Heleopolis Egyptian myth, where we discussed it in details in the last episode, and I would recommend you to watch it in order to understand this episode. In the Heleopolis Egyptian myth, which dates back to about 2400 BC, it's mentioned that before creation, the primeval ocean Nu surrounded space. And then out of the ocean, Atum, the Egyptian god, has risen. To support his majesty, he created a mound called BenBen, which Egyptians consider it as a pyramidal shape. From this mythology, we can draw a figure of a pyramid surrounded by endless water, and on top rises the Eye of Ra, representing Atum. This image that ancient Egyptians were talking about in their mythology is the basis of their great pyramids that they have built, probably being influenced by the floods that dry out, leaving mounds behind. And here where it gets interesting, where I do see a great correlation between the mythology and the functionality of the pyramids, and how deeply they are linked to the water. Water was where the pyramids first rose from in their mythology, and water will always be the primeval source of ancient Egyptian existence and survival. That is why they gave it great importance, and that is why they built the pyramids, which is the first structure that rose from the primeval ocean in their ideology. Now, you will ask me, so what is the function of the pyramid in relation to the water? The answer, my friend, is clear. It is to purify and filter the water from its lower state, representing the Nile water, and ascend it to its higher pure state through the limestone. This purification method and technique was based on ancient Egyptians' main science in their time, which was alchemy. Alchemy is the science that bases its methods from raising a state of matter from its lower state to its higher state, and in our case was the water. What they were trying to do was to create a monolithic purification method of the Nile water. Think about it. When water enters the chamber in narrow passages, it will cross through limestone. And you can search about the purification properties of limestone, particularly in water treatment. It's primarily composed of calcium carbonate, which can react with acidic water to neutralize it, effectively improving the water quality. Limestone can also be used to remove impurities and reduce water hardness. And by no coincidence, those narrow passageways inside the pyramids are sloped. The reason is to create manual cycle motion. To recap, so far we have wells underneath the pyramid, dried branch of the Nile River crossing next to the pyramid, and a primeval ocean surrounding the pyramidal mound in the creation myth. Those three key points have played a major key role in building my hypothesis that the pyramids are in actuality the filters of the Nile River, or man-made mountains, in other words, the pumping heart of Egypt, built by Egyptians in an approach to mimic nature's ability to filter, store, and harness the energy of water and control the direction of the water to the lands of Egypt. And once the water is raised to its higher purified state, it will be used as a source of life. But not only source of life, but also a great purification method in their religious rituals. Ancient Egyptians were highly known for their agricultural revolutions, and through agriculture, their civilization flourished and was given order and life. Also, a main question you need to ask is, how did ancient Egyptians filter their water? Of course, they did not drink directly from the Nile, as it would be contaminated and dirty. Rather, they built their own filtration system, and the pyramids played a major part in purifying their water. And as we know, actual mountains not only filter water, but also direct it to different parts on the land. So that is also another property of the pyramids, which is directing the purified water to different parts of the land of Egypt. So here's the question. What do you do when you live in a flat, dry desert like ancient Egypt, and you don't have any mountains? In the ancient Egyptian mind, you just build one. Same as mountains filter water, rain and snow fall high on the peaks as water travels down. It seeps through stone sediment minerals, and by the time it reaches a spring or aquifer, it's clean, mineralized, and often drinkable. The earth does the filtering. Now, what if ancient Egyptian engineers tried to recreate that same natural system, but artificially, with stone, geometry, and knowledge of the land? Think about it for a minute. High elevation in mountains is needed to pressure the spring water and direct it to longer distances on the lands. And that is why ancient Egyptians needed a structure as big as the pyramids to be able to pressure and direct the water. However, the size of the pyramid, which is about 481 feet, is nothing compared to a real Catherine Mountain in Egypt, standing at 8,668 feet. So the question is, how can the Egyptians produce enough pressure to be able to filter and direct the water to longer distances? At this point, the ancient Egyptians thought out of the box. So instead of building an 8,000 feet pyramid in elevation, they dug a deep well beneath the pyramid, which is what the new discovery have showed under the radar, which I will leave you the link for all the sources in the description box. This depth is more than enough to be able to pump the filtered water through pressure and direct it to longer distances in Egypt. Here's where it gets strange. The core of the Great Pyramid of Giza is made of local limestone, which is porous and ideal for absorbing and channeling water. The outer casing, now mostly gone, was built from Tura limestone, a much finer, denser material, almost watertight. In other words, the pyramid was designed like a multi-layered filter. The water then fills the queen's chamber, then it pressures it in manual cycle to the king's chamber, crossing two filter layers. So the chambers and the narrow passages purify the water. Then from the king's chamber, it gets pressured down the subterranean chamber, and from there, it enters the deep wells to create a very high pressure. Now this high pressure is more than enough to pump the newly filtered and sacred water to greater distances in Egypt using the coiled pipes that were also discovered wrapped around the cylindrical wells. Now I know some people would say that those discoveries are not actually wells. They don't even look like wells in how they portrayed them in their discovery. However, they can't just tell exactly what are they just created an image that what would they look like. So they do know there is long cylindrical shaped wells underneath, but they are not exactly sure what are they. But according to my hypothesis, the discovery could be cylindrical wells that store and pump water upward using the coiled pipes wrapped around them. And as we know in fluid dynamics, coil-shaped pipes are known to influence the flow characteristics significantly. The curvature of these pipes induces secondary flows, which enhance mixing and heat transfer. It also results in higher pressure drops compared to straight pipes due to increased friction and flow resistance. Ancient Egyptian texts also referred to pyramids as mer, which is a word that is tied to ascension, channels, and even flow. and recent research reveals they might have been much more than stone tombs. The ascension was a symbol of the flow of water ascending upwards in the inner channels, which is the primeval ocean new in the creation mythology, from the Nile lower state, which is the contaminated state, to its higher alchemical purified state. And I know that some people would say that the ascension here means the ascension of the pharaoh, but also you need to know that in the creation myth, Atum, whom is directly connected to the pharaoh through Ra, will ascend to the top of the pyramid in the creation myth. And that is what they were trying to recreate, is connecting the element of water to the land through the Great Pyramid. After water travels upward or outward, it would pass through layers of limestone, slowly being filtered again and then pumped and directed to the lands of Egypt. Inside the pyramids, there are chambers, shafts, and sealed cavities. The subterranean chamber of the Great Pyramid, for example, sits below ground level, carved directly into the bedrock. Some researchers believe it may have once been part of the hydraulic system. What if this chamber collected groundwater? What if it acted as a pressure chamber? So this ancient device is a mimic of an aquifer system, where water is stored, filtered, and channeled. We're not just talking fantasy here. The ancient Nabateans of Petra, yes, the civilization that carved temples into cliffs, engineered underground water tanks and channels to survive in the desert. If they did it, why not the Egyptians? We even have records of ancient Egyptians valuing different types of stone for different ritual purposes. They knew their materials. They weren't just stacking rocks. The Nile wasn't the quiet, meandering river we see today. Its branches spread like fingers across the desert, and one of those fingers reached directly toward the Giza Plateau, as scientists have discovered. There's growing evidence that an ancient tributary or canal of the Nile flowed right past the pyramid of Khafre, maybe even connected to it. These weren't random. They may have fed into the complex deliberately. Now think about it. The same people who aligned the pyramids with stars, solstices, and sacred numbers also chose specific locations where water, tables, and bedrock met. They weren't guessing. They were harnessing nature, recreating the power of the earth in stone. Mountains filter and store water, and the pyramids might have done the same. From that water, the ancient Egyptians survived hard years of drought. As you all know, ancient Egypt went through many years of drought, and the pyramid was the source of their agriculture and life in general. Or in other words, the BenBen primeval mound that rose from the oceans of Nu for their creation myth that we discussed in details in the previous episode, and became their divine mound that protected them and provided them the gift of survival and life. The Nile can be the blood of Egypt, and the pyramids are the pumping heart that pumps the unpurified water from its lower state using the lungs, which are the chambers creating the breathing pressure into the veins and arteries, which in our case are the chambers and the deep discovered wells, same as what our actual heart does in our body. This shows us how the pyramids were not tombs, as mainstream archaeology claims. They were never a symbol of death. Unlike that, they were a symbol of life, survival, and strong will of human being. The purified water coming right from the sacred pyramids was highly admired by the ancient Egyptians and of high religious importance. In addition, the pyramids stored the water in case of drought to maintain the survival of the Black Lands of Kemet. In addition to what I discussed, there's also a discovery that was found in August 5th of 2024. But this time on the step pyramid of the Djoser, where researchers said they found evidence the step pyramid had a water filtration and hydraulic system that cleaned water from nearby canals and determined its flow from practical use. The aim of that research was to prove that the pyramid stones were lifted using hydraulic force. However, me personally, I think the hydraulic part was mainly for filtration and water control system, which is a powerful proof that those pyramids acted like a man-made mountain system. I will leave you the links to that discovery in the description box so that you can read it yourself. So far, what do you think? Do you still believe that pyramids are merely tombs or power station made by aliens, as many think? Or you changed your mind and decided to connect with reality and join the hydraulic pyramid theory model? Let me know in the comment box. My question to those who believe the pyramids produced electricity: why would ancient Egyptians use electricity for? Is it because the pharaoh was too excited to watch his favorite TV show on a Friday night and wanted electricity to turn his TV? Or is it because his son wanted to enjoy playing video games on his high-performance gaming system? In other words, give me one proof of an electrical device that is found among all the remains and antiques of ancient Egypt. Until then, I might change my mind. After we discussed the hydraulic theory of the pyramids, in other words, the heart of Egypt, where pyramids are acting like artificial mountains, a question rises. What would happen in case of floods? What if the ancient Egyptians were waiting for a major flood incident that would bring chaos? How can they manage the flow of water in the area? Flood myths are everywhere, from the Epic of Gilgamesh to the story of Noah. The ancient Hindu texts describing a global deluge, civilizations around the world remember it, from South America to Mesopotamia. Could Egypt have expected the same? Imagine a rising, uncontrollable flood swallowing the Nile. Cities vanish, temples drown, the skies fall dark. The ancient elite, the priesthood, perhaps, even survivors from a lost civilization, they built the pyramids not to glorify death, but to survive life. And beneath them, drainage wells. When water levels rise, the pyramid's internal chambers could fill, then channel the water into the underground walls, acting as pressure release systems, not only protecting the structure, but keeping the interior usable even as the world outside drowned. Ancient flood bunkers. Think about it. These structures have angled shafts, perfectly aligned, deep subterranean chambers, granite plugs, ventilation tunnels, but no confirmed mummy. Even the place they claim to be a coffin does not look like a regular pharaoh sarcophagus or a coffin, like the ones we see in museums, as ancient Egyptians used to design the pharaoh sarcophagus in the most fancy ways and have writings on it considered the eternal resting place for the pharaoh. It would be very disrespectful to consider that thing that they call coffin inside the pyramid to be an actual coffin. Show you the picture of it right here. The pyramids weren't tombs. They were machines for survival. Also, I would like to add here that in all pyramids of Giza, they don't have any single hieroglyph of Anubis, whom is the god of death. So tell me now, Anubis, whom is the god of death found in coffins, temples, you name it, does not have a single hieroglyph in the actual symbol of death, whom you consider tombs, and I mean mainstream Egyptology. Explain this for me, please. Any Egyptologist that is listening to me now, explain to me in the comment box, how is this possible that the symbol of death, Anubis, whom is supposed to take the pharaoh into the passage of death, is absent inside the pyramids. How can this be? How can the symbol of death has no one hieroglyph in the pyramids? If your mind is racing right now, if you're starting to feel that pull toward the unknown, make sure you're subscribed to Mystifyles. Also, speaking of riddles, if you are seeking a great inspirational book of life's riddle, make sure to purchase my book, The Riddle of Life, available on Amazon. I will leave you the link in the description box, as this book might definitely change the way you look at the world. Every episode, we peel back another layer of ancient history. You don't want to miss what's coming next. Also, share it with someone who always brings up aliens at the dinner table. You know who I'm talking about. Alright, back to the mystery. Let's ground this in science. We know that the ancient Egyptians mastered hydraulic engineering. The Fayum Basin irrigation system, for example, used ancient canals and locks that modern scientists still admire. Archaeologist Robert Schoch, known for his work on the Sphinx water erosion theory, believes Egypt's monuments are far older than we think, carved at a time when the Sahara was lush and prone to intense seasonal flooding. Studies from the Geological Society of America have shown extensive water erosion on the Sphinx enclosure, not caused by sand, but rushing rainwater. Could have the entire Giza complex have once faced a cataclysmic wet age? Then consider this. The granite used in the pyramid's interior is water resistant. The air shafts could serve as ventilation if the interior was sealed. The underground Queen's Chamber lies in a perfect position to act as a water intake buffer. These details may not be decorative, they might be functional. Now pair that with the discovery of vertical wells beneath Khafre's pyramid, designed to collect, store, and expel water. The pieces start to fit together. Let's ask a chilling question. What if the ancients knew something we didn't? What if their obsession with astronomy, with precision, with survival wasn't just spiritual? What if it was practical? We stand at the feet of giants, but forget to ask what they were running from. The pyramids are not monuments of death. They are messages in stone. Their design isn't just sacred, it's mathematical, astronomical, geological, and now hydrological. The wells beneath Khafre might just be the smoking gun, proof that ancient engineers prepared for a global event, a deluge. Whether it came or is yet to come, that's up to us to discover. But one thing is clear, they built those pyramids for survival. Those shafts and chambers could be the passageways of water to ascend and descend, to filter and pump the water. Egyptian mythology speaks of the BenBen stone, the primordial mound that emerged from the chaotic floodwaters at the dawn of time. Sounds familiar? It's a pyramid. A man-made BenBen could very well have been Egypt's symbolic and literal answer to global catastrophe. In many mythologies, floods are cyclical. Civilizations rise, then they are wiped away by deluge. Atlantis, Mesopotamia, even Noah's Ark. What if the pyramids were ancient Egyptians' ark? Not sailing above the waters, but anchored in stone, rising through the flood to preserve life, knowledge, and civilization. These stone giants weren't just built to endure time, they were built to endure nature itself. Think about it. The pyramids can represent the BenBen from their creation myth, and the BenBen is the first mound that rose from the waters of Nun. What does that mean? This means that the ancient Egyptians were trying to create a cosmic story carved in their stones, where the pharaoh, whom is the direct representative of Ra from their creation myth, will play the role of actual Ra in the creation myth and will rise on top of the mound, in other words, on top of the hierarchy. And after the chaos, Ra, or in other words, the pharaoh, will be the hope of Egypt in bringing back order and peace to their lands. And in this way, the Egyptians were able to recreate their creation myth, their source of creation, on a macrocosmic level. In this manner, the pyramids can represent their source of life, in other words, their source of creation. Silent stone, watching the floods come and go, cleaning, protecting, surviving. They were never a symbol of death, but rather a symbol of life, of survival. Beneath the ancient stone, water may have flowed not just as life source, but as a force of resurrection. And while the pyramid rose as the heart of the earth, something else pointed to the heavens. A slender needle of stone carved with forgotten codes, a beacon, a conductor. In the next episode of Mystifiles, we unravel the unknown mystery of the obelisks. Were they just monuments, or were they ancient machines channeling energy from the above? Stay tuned, because the secret only gets stranger. I would like to thank everyone who reached this part of the podcast. Also, if you would like to know how the pyramids were built, make sure to check this video on the right. Moreover, if you do like my work and would like to support my research, you can do that by donating in my Patreon account or by buying my book, The Riddle of Life. I'll leave you all the links in the description box. Thank you so much.